Okay, welcome. Welcome to all of you to our session on reaching out to marginalized youth. My name is Mary and I'm from Ireland.
And I'm Jonathan from Africa Regional Office.
Okay, and despite the fact that you can hear us, we need to use microphones because we're being streamed live. So this means for us that we have to stay within this certain radius. And for you, it means that if you want to ask a question or answer a question or put a point for your group or something like that, you need to come and stand here. Okay? It also means that during the group work that will be part of the session later on, we'll ask one of the groups to come and sit here. Yeah?
Sure.
Okay. Anybody got a problem with any of that? No? Okay, excellent. Thank you for your cooperation. So I'm Mary and this is Jonathan, as we said. And here we have Sopak and Philip, who are our online coordinators. So as well as being streamed live and going out to the world, we're expecting the world to come into the room. And these guys will give us all of the information that comes, if any information comes, from online while we're here. And at the back of the room, or towards the back of the room, we have Eugene and Olienka, yeah, who are the rapporteurs for the session. So they will try and capture everything that happens, all of the outcomes and conclusions of the session, in order to feed into the report that will go from the whole of the conference, yeah? Okay, so all of you are welcome. I see all of you come from different parts of the world. Do we want to start by asking people what region they're from? So if we have people from the African region, do we have anybody from the African region? Jonathan? Hold up your hand.
Okay.
Okay. And from APR? The home region? Yeah? From Europe? Okay. From Eurasia? Okay. And from Inter-America? Hey. Okay. So we have someone for everywhere.
Yeah.
We're well done.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So we have a task for you to start. We'd like you to write on your Post-its. There are Post-its in front of you somewhere. We'd like you to write your expectation for the session. We appreciate that we haven't yet looked at the objectives or looked at what we're going to do, but we'd like you to tell us what it is your expectations are of this session. Quite quickly, just a line or two, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Okay, and now we'd like you to we'd like to ask you to move out of your comfortable seats. And if you find somebody that you don't know in the room, and introduce yourself to them and share your expectations with them quickly, please. Okay. Yeah. You've done that?
Yeah, that was first. Okay.
You are both from the APR?
Yeah, but we didn't know one another.
Okay, all right. Okay. The extremes of the APR. Okay. You're from Sri Lanka. Okay. Very good. It's a long flight. It's a long flight from Australia to Sri Lanka. Okay, very good. Okay, so when you've done that, if you would swap your expectations, please, so the other person might hold on to yours, and at the end of the session, we'll come back and you can review again what it was you did. If you would swap, and he will look after your expectations and mind them for you, protect them for the session. Yeah, okay. Guard them. Okay. I should talk some more. You don't want me to talk anymore. You're good. The light? Okay, so we'll return to your expectations again at the end, towards the end of the session, and see where we got to. And in the meantime, we hope that, without knowing what they are, of course, but we hope that we can meet them. When we talk about marginalized youth, of course, in Scouting, it's very important, particularly as it's well recognized that young people who are adolescents or young adults are, if they get it stray, I suppose, from a safe and secure path in their lives during the time when they're adolescents or young adults, they're much more inclined to end up in trouble and end up on the margins of society and find it more difficult to get back. And of course, it's adolescents and young people that we deal with primarily in Scouting. So anyway, Jonathan will go through the objectives we have.
So we hope that by the end of this session, which as much as possible will be interactive, we'll cover the following objectives. One is that we'll recognize some of the different global trends or realities for marginalized youth. We'll also consider the role, which is critical, what some of the roles the NSOs can play in responding to the needs of the marginalized youth. We also identify different approaches to working with the marginalized youth. And finally, we'll inspire concrete actions, because at the end of the day, the session is supposed to trigger some action into what we can do differently to impact more in terms of reaching out to the marginalized youth. So Mary, how can you tell us in a definition form what is marginalization?
Thank you, Jonathan. This is not going to be a song and dance routine. No, absolutely not. Okay, so here we have a definition of marginalized youth, and it's quite complex. And of course, any of you who deal directly with young people who are in difficult circumstances for whatever reason, understand that none of it's simple. You know, I mean, it's always complex. There are always overlapping effects or overlapping issues that need to be dealt with or need to be resolved, I suppose, in order to get to the crux, in order to be able to help and have a positive impact on young people within us. And there are, I suppose, a number of ways that we as Scout leaders and I suppose National Scout associations can support young people. And we do it every day. We do it through all of the youth work that we do within our programs. But I suppose recognizing those people, whether they're within our association who have special needs, with regard to the fact that, you know, they don't absolutely fit in the box that we might call your average person, your person who, like, recognizes and can take. You're very welcome. When we're designing program, I suppose, and when we're creating program and delivering program and working with young people at all levels, we have to cater to the average, I suppose. But we have to understand at all times that there are people, that nobody is the average. You know, that everybody comes at it from a different angle. And so we need to be aware of that always. And that's just part of the complexity of working with young people. So here we have some statistics, and or not. Here we have some numbers. And so in order to turn them into statistics, you need to give me a number. Somebody needs to call out a number, and I will tell you what it relates to. 50. And in this instance, since 1970, I can tell you that the proportion of children under 5 who died in the world has dropped dramatically. And it has dropped by 50% in the Middle East and in North America. The most dramatic drop is 64% in Latin America and the Caribbean. So 50 is a good number because 50 is a positive number. Anybody else? 870. There are 870 million of the 7.1 billion people in the world. 870 million of them are hungry or suffering from chronic undernourishment. Next, 31.5. In 2003, 85% of people in the Batkan province of Kyrgyzstan were living in poverty. Okay, that's 85% of people. Following a comprehensive and effective project by the UNDC over the following 6 years, that fell to 31.5%. So in 2012, 31.5% of people were living in poverty. But that was a huge increase from 6 years earlier. Next, anybody? 700. There was an increase of up to 700% in HIV infection rates found in parts of the Russian Federation between 2006 and 2010. So in 4 years, there was an increase of 700%. Isn't that fantastic? Okay? 700% increase. What is the explanation? Oh, sorry.
We have it also in Israel. The numbers, I'm from Israel. I'm
Yeah.
most from Israel. And in my profession, I deal also with HIV patients. And we have also an increase. The thing is that the medications, the therapy is so efficient nowadays that most of HIV carriers are not AIDS patients. They can go for life.
Okay.
This caused a problem also that we see in Scouts, that youth or adolescent, they think that they don't need anymore to use condoms, for example,
Okay.
or because because they say, well, the disease, that's it, disappeared. It's a lot of also ignorant of the situation because they don't understand that even being a carrier is a big, big problem. So I think in Russia too, this is the assumption that, okay, people are not dying anymore from this terrible, terrible disease because medications are so good and can keep probably for life carriers without moving to being ill.
Okay, so do you think then that there's a 700% increase means that there's a whole pile more people living?
That so
people, there's an increase because people continue to live with the disease as opposed to people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Anybody else? 2/3, very good. Somebody said 2 out of 3, but it is 2/3, which is, I suppose, 2/3 of the 759 million adults lacking literacy skills are women. So 759, according to the EFA reaching the marginalized, 759 adults lack literary skills in the world, and 2/3 of those are women. Anybody else? 57 million children of school-going age were not in school in 2011. But that's actually down from 72 million people in 2007. So it's also a positive number. Did we miss one? 45.2. By the end of 2012, 45.2 billion people were forcibly displaced worldwide as a result of persecution, conflict, generalized violence, and human rights violations. 42.5 million. Is that them? So there are a lot of big numbers. You know, it's not a small problem. It's not an issue that isn't relevant everywhere. Okay? Any comments? No? No, absolutely not. But there are lots of positive. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to show you an example of a Scout tool. And this is a project called Ticket to Life. Do people know it? Okay, some do and some don't. It's a project that actually started in Kenya some years back. But the slide we have for you comes from the Philippines. In the Philippines, they started 6 years ago. They spent a year in the, I suppose you would say, in setting it up and getting sponsors and sourcing, identifying people in need.
This is Jerwin's parents. This is the family. They are his siblings. That's the mother. Nice Marjorie. One of his sons enjoyed the scouting because his son, Jerwin, the eldest son, believed that through scouting, the values and skills that he learned from scouting, in the future, he will have a good future and a better life, so that his mother and his sibling will be out of the street.
So for 3 hours every Saturday afternoon, these 3 children attend a Scout meeting. And during the Scout meeting, they do activities the same as all of us do in our Scout meetings. They also get fed, and their uniforms are provided for them. So they're no different to children all over the world, and the Scout program provides and builds life skills the same way as it does, the same way as we do, all over the world. But so the video, there's a much longer video available online for anybody who's interested. We just wanted to give you some flavor of this here, so you would see what it was. Does anybody have any questions? No? It's a very interesting and very worthwhile project that, like I say, has been running for a number of years now, and very successfully. Who funds the project? Well, they source funds in order to cover their costs. So it would change from time to time. Yeah. Okay. We have Sid at the back of the room just at the moment in case anybody has any questions in particular in relation to the video. But if you haven't, we'll move on. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so that's one example of what is happening here in the APR, but there are, and in Scouting, but there are projects being funded all over the world, and this is just a map of the money that was handed out in the European region in the last year to projects that were being funded by the European Social Fund. And we have a couple of examples of, but as you can see from the map, there were projects all over the world, all over Europe that were funded. Can you do this? So just to go through a couple of them quickly. In Hungary? No? In Denmark? Very good. So in Denmark, this initiative is managed on the ground in schools. The retention coordinators ensure that a coordinated approach is taken to each young person at risk. And it's about trying to support young people. And the teachers are provided with training to do it. And the whole idea is to keep people in school so that they will gain the education that they require, because leaving school is the first step to falling outside the risk. In Hungary. In Hungary, so the education, so what they provide is education, training, health, and employment. In addition, the project will establish youth community clubs and organize local community leisure activities and offer after-school activities in order to encourage and enable and give some sense of pride and achievement to those living in extreme poverty in this particular village. In Portugal, there was a project that worked with, there's a lot of Portuguese immigrants from the Portuguese colony live in part of the old town of Lisbon. And so this project focused on one of those neighborhoods. Obviously, well, not obviously, but actually they suffer significant unemployment levels. And there's an environment that encourages crime and drug trafficking and that sort of thing. So the whole idea is that with the help of local businesses, they achieved excellent results and have 70% of the people supported by the project went on to achieve full employment. And the last one is a project in the UK which focused on young people between the ages of 14 and 19 who are either outside of education, employment, or training. And it's about building entrepreneurial skills and working on an individual basis with these young people in order to build their entrepreneurial skills. And of the 319 people who participated in the project, 280 of them went on to be gainfully employed. So there's huge success rates. But there's also a lot of money available now. That's on the... Okay. Okay. Right.
Why bother to do all this? And with all the beautiful projects, but more importantly, all the needs to be addressed. Why is it relevant to us as national scout organizations to do this? So I think it will be important for us to revisit the mission of scouting. And we want to educate young people who will be able to play a constructive role in the community. And I think our mission will compel us to really rethink of how do we include all the young people who come into the movement, whether from the mainstream society or the marginalized. How do we move with all of them so that in fulfilling the mission of scouting, it gives us that compelling desire to create a difference. So that's one of the reasons that should motivate us as national scout organizations to really reflect on reaching out to the marginalized and do something. I know later in the presentation we'll be doing community action plans, but ideally our mission should inspire us to create that difference. When you watch the video, it's just an ordinary scout leader within a local scout group making that difference. And I trust from the video, those young people will never be the same again. Then again, when you look at our fundamental principles, the call for duty to others, that also needs to inspire us that it may be simplistic, it may be, but it means a lot. What does it mean for duty to others? That's why even from the Cub Scout level, the Cub Scout says, I makes a promise to help somebody every day. So I think that also, that pillar, one of the core pillars of the principle of scouting, it should also inspire the national scout organizations to say that we can do something to make a difference. Not just to sit and watch, but to be active participants, because scouting is all about creative, positive social change.
Okay, and we can, thank you. We can move from the mission of Scouting and the principles of Scouting, which is where we get our need to want to be involved in with all of young people in society, to the Scout method, which helps us to reflect on how young people are involved in a learning community where they build their own skills within that learning community. And these life skills are ultimately important for everybody's development. But what we want to ask you now is, when you think about marginalized youth, or you think about perhaps what it is you should be considering in your national association in relation to marginalized youth, who are those marginalized youth? What are their circumstances? Where do they come from? In your society, who are the marginalized youth that your association might do better or serve better? Peter? You have refugees, yeah. Does anybody else have similar? Does anybody else face the issue with refugees in their country? Which is not necessarily refugees. Ethnic minorities could be people who are living in your society for a long time. Yes. You have ethnic minorities as well. Very good. Anybody else? You're Indigenous people, yeah. And Indigenous people everywhere. And just being born into a particular race of people can mean you're marginalized. Nothing has to happen to you during your life. You just happen to be born. Sorry? School dropouts, yeah. Young people. And in Germany? Are you German? Austrian? Swiss? Swedish? There you go. Okay. Okay, so poverty. Handicapped. Prisoners. That works with prisoners. Well, I suppose it depends on why they're in jail. Yeah. Oh, okay. There you recruited them. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. And it has a big influence on their environment, yeah. And is it driven from poverty? It probably is driven from poverty. No? Okay. Yeah. At the back of the room? Any more? Or is it covered here? Okay. Right, so that's a long list. Lots of, or certainly one or two of each of them may apply to all of you, or could apply to any of us. Okay, so for the next stage, we're going to have you do some work for a change. All of this sitting back, enjoying, relaxing, watching has come to an end. We're going to have you do some work. And we're going to look at a couple of different areas of how we can engage as Scout associations with people who live on the margins of society. And of course, we can think about educating our members or engaging in society or inspiring others to take action. And so we'd like to ask you to consider, actually, sorry, Jonathan. What we might ask you to do first, actually, because we are going to ask you to consider these questions in working groups, but it might be more productive if we do so, if we ask you to form groups around something that you find interesting for yourselves, yeah? So if there were people who were interested in working together with marginalized people dealing with refugees, because that was an issue for them, and if there were 3 or 4 of you interested in that, it might be useful to develop that through the rest of the session. Yeah? So is that something that people might be interested in? Refugees? Yes? No? Yes? Yes? 1? Okay. Right. This What? Pick a couple and you'll go there. Okay, so we'll pick refugees. Is this all right, Jess? Say yes. We'll pick school dropouts because they could happen to anybody. And we will pick somebody else. Poverty. Could happen to us all. Okay? So, refugees. Poverty. And this one over here is school dropouts. Can we have 3 groups, please? Poverty. Poverty, refugees, school dropouts. Yeah. Poverty, refugees, school dropouts. Peter, you want a group on your own? Yeah. Okay, very good. No. Okay, maybe we have 2 groups. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Could we have 2 people here who wouldn't mind working in the area of poverty, please? Thank you. Now, so you're going to have a
You are not the majority anymore. Peter.
Okay, so now we have. So now that you have a group, you have to pick a question. So we're dealing with refugees. Do we want to talk about building behavior and attitude? Do we want to talk about specific projects? Or do we want to talk about competence and training? Okay, you get one.
Give us one, yep. Okay, so Martin, why don't you pick and we will follow you?
Why don't
Okay.
Since you have refugees in your country.
don't pick the first one because it's been picked.
Number 2. 2 or 3.
Well, I guess one of them that I can immediately think of is we have many young people, some of them coming solo without their parents, who immediately they come into our country are put in detention, and that we should be looking at starting scouting programs for these young people, because there is nothing for them at all once they arrive in our country. They could be as young as 4 or 5, right through to 30 or 40 years of age. So
they're not put in the formal education system?
no, because the government will not recognise them. They are put into detention. The moment that they are put into detention, they are put into an educational program, but they do that under guards. So they go to normal schools close to where they are being incarcerated, but they come home after the end of school and nothing happens for them. So straight away, we could involve some after-school programs.
I just want to add that in our case, something like this would be, you know, that we work in tribes, and we have local tribes, like we have all over the country. So, for example, for such people, if they're not in detention, but if because we don't have refugees, but if they are in a very poor neighborhood, we would go and have there a tribe, like a scout tribe that has activities twice a week, and with all, but it's a different tribe than the others because they don't have any tradition of scout. They don't know what scout is. It's not that I can ask them to wear uniforms, and so we have to build a totally different program, but this is something that we would do.
So who would do that? Would volunteers do it?
Okay, we have like a mother tribe that would send from a very strong tribe, let's say in Tel Aviv. And in the south of Tel Aviv, there is a very poor neighborhood. So from the big and strong tribe, we will send both volunteers, but not also children, like rovers before the army. They would go and they'll have their own patrol groups. And also this tribe will fund the activity because we cannot charge the kids that are very poor. They will get help from the scout in Israel, the management. But this is how will it work.
One thing that we have found in Sweden as well is before we have looked at asylum seekers and migrants as group of people who are in different kinds of problem and initiated projects to help them, and we have made them a social issue instead of turning it all around and saying these are people that could contribute to our organization. So now we're trying to add a perspective more like saying, we need you, we would like you to help us, and at the same time they are able to gain personal development from it, which is also starting to give good results, because these young people and these adults, instead of being seen as a social problem, they are seen as a resource that can contribute to the society. And I like both of your ideas. One, to take stronger groups that can assist in areas that have less possibilities themselves, and as you are saying, to find those who are in custody or just have arrived. I believe also that scouting could be a good place to learn the local language when you arrive to a new country. We have a lot of surveys seeing that new immigrants or migrants have hard times to learn the language the first years when you arrive to a new country, because you are not truly integrated in the society. You're not put in regular classes, but in classes with other refugees. So you don't really get to know Swedish friends, Swedish families. Without the language, you don't get your first job, and then you don't learn the language when talking at the workplace. But scouting, if the educational system for Swedish or new Swedes could enable that you can learn some language while doing scouting, then you will also learn a lot of new friends. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can say a few things also. I think in terms of refugees, compared to your situation, it's very rare that we have refugees arriving alone, as far as I know. They arrive in families usually, but they also send in kind of detention or asylum centers while their case is looked at and decided, and it takes up to years, it may half a year at least, to find out whether they are real refugees or someone who should be sent back, right? So, and I think it could be really one of the places that we could also work while they're there, at least when we know it's to create this platform of integration in the Danish society, with the prospect that they might stay or they might leave. One of the things, of course, is that we have this other NGO, or this it's called Save the Children. You know that, yeah, and they run part of these asylum centers, so they're quite strong in that field. But I think they probably don't use the let's say the scout method and approach. So I think we could maybe build some partnerships if we want to engage in that project. So I think that's what I see for now, at least, could be worth looking at from a Danish perspective.
My English poor, but I will try. I will try. I would like to ask Martin, do you know Amahoro Amani project? Can you explain them what we are doing?
So in Burundi, the Swedish scouts are helping, but mostly Burundian scouts in the Great Sea region in Africa. They are working with a lot of projects since the last 20 years almost, since the 2005 the Amahoro Amani started, but already in the 90s there were some after the wars in the countries, and they are working with dialogue with different tribes and different groups in the society, where young people get to learn each other, young people who are living in refugee camps that have been separated from their families. Scouts and scout leaders help them to locate where their families or relatives are, and bringing the families back together. And scouting is also working in schools and in child family centers and child villages, contributing with education to young people that are outside the formal school system as well. And I know one of the projects is also to give young women a bigger role in the local society, and giving them sometimes the first access to leadership training or to having a formal position in an organization. So it's building confidence, it's building experience, and a lot of it is focused and centered to dialogue between young people from different parts of the society. Yeah, was that a good explanation, Gilbert?
You know that last month there are the war in east of Congo. We organized the young people who went to the camps and began to work with the children refugees, with the games, some alphabetization, yeah, and to share some food with those children. But what I would like to show you is that some NGO which were there before scouting to get into the refugee camp. Was very angry, because all children went to the scout because they like the method of scout. Then the NGO went to contact the chair of the refugee camp and ask him why the scouts are in the refugee camp. That is maybe to show you that the scouting method is a good one, which can help the young people, like the children, to be comfortable during the staying in the refugee camp.
Si vous faut parler français, je peux translater un peu. No, I'm not. I think that engaging in society has 2 bullet points, but we are only supposed to, or allowed to. But this is also a good example on how different the situation could be in our different communities and countries as well. And even in Australia, quite a big country, I assume there's a lot of difference, and in Israel also, depending on in which region you live, which is also sometimes a difficulty to be able to make the local scout groups and communities to make projects that are relevant in just their context. Sometimes it's hard to make one project in each NSO or each country that solves all the problems on a national level. And I'm not sure if that slightly is question number 4, how we can help our scout leaders and trainers to be better at this on local level as well.
In the last 30 years, we have put a lot of our own money into developing our indigenous communities. We have had an enormous amount of government money that has been given, but we have not made any inroads because the culture is so different between our indigenous people who don't value education, who don't see the need to go to school, who don't see they are nomadic, they don't see the need to live in houses. So every couple of weeks they continue to keep moving around, and it is because they are in isolated parts of Australia, it is more costly to fly into some of those communities than what it is to fly from Brisbane to London. And quite often you get there and the people are no longer there, they have walked to their next area. And it is just very, very frustrating. So we've got some good training programs in place to support our leaders, but we have got that cultural divide between what we accept and what the local indigenous communities accept.
Are they the Australian natives, Poppy? That's what you refer to? They are moving.
They are moving. Yes, exactly. There are many who have been who have accepted the Australian way of life, who are living in houses now, living in local communities, and the assimilation has been terrific. And in many instances, you would not even know that now because there's been, mixed breeding, etc. Yes, and but there is still a very, very significant group who are living in the isolated parts of Australia who just don't see the need. So they are living the same way that their great-great-great-great-grandparents would have. It's what they want, yes, because they see that when they get involved with developed societies, that they get sick, that we bring alcohol in, that causes a whole lot of issues. They would prefer just to go about it their own way. Yes. No, not at all. Not at all. I think that I think we should. I think we need to say that we should be giving everyone the opportunity to experience what we know as the Australian way of life, but for the truly Indigenous people who want to live the way that their forefathers and ancestors have lived, that we should be offering them that position, because what the government has done historically is taken the children away and put them in institutions, and it is just wrong. So I think that we just need to respect that. But that is my personal opinion. It's certainly not a government opinion.
And when you reach them, you say that it's difficult to reach them, but when you reach them, how do they react to the Scout platform?
They love the activities. They enjoy it. But our Scout leaders must go and round them up. So that because time means nothing to them. A watch the day of the week means nothing. So, the plane will fly in on a Thursday and it will fly out on a Monday, and our Scout leaders, and we might be paying $2,000 Australian dollars, $2,000 American dollars to get Scout leaders up there, because we are thinking if we can make the inroads, and the government is giving us this money, it's not Scouting's money, but then we will just find that there has been a death in one of the communities, so everyone is mourning, so nothing can happen for 4 weeks.
No communication, you have to take the plane to go there and find out that you're not wanted?
Because they don't have mobile phones, they don't write, they don't value education. They are living the way that they lived hundreds and hundreds, if almost thousands of years ago. Yes, yes, yes.
Why should they do it? Or do you really think that at the end of the day it will worth the effort?
I think we need to respect that for some people. I think the government needs to be able to give those people that want to join the way that other Australians living, that they need to give them that opportunity. But we also need to respect that there are some people who will never ever want to live in a city or live in a house that always want to be free to roam. But that's a personal opinion.
Je vais parler en français, tu vas traduire. Je voudrais dire quelque chose. C'est par rapport le volontariat chez les scouts. Le projet Amaoramani, nous avons commencé avec des scouts et des non-scouts. Mais après 2 ans, les non-scouts sont partis parce qu'ils voulaient qu'on leur donne de l'argent. Et nous, c'était le volontariat. Et maintenant, ils ne sont plus avec nous. Donc, le scoutisme vraiment apprend aux jeunes de s'engager dans la société comme volontaires. Et ce n'est pas fait pour tout le monde. Donc, si vous voyez des jeunes qui restent beaucoup dans le scoutisme et qui s'engagent dans la société, c'est-à-dire qu'ils ont eu une éducation de base qui peut les aider. Et là, c'est l'expérience que je viens de dire, où on a commencé avec des scouts et des non-scouts, parce que c'est de l'éducation à la paix. Mais après, les non-scouts, ils sont partis parce qu'ils ne voyaient pas de l'argent qu'on leur donnait.
You have to correct me if I'm not right, but that is a difference between those who have been or are scouts and those who are not scouts when you try to engage them in the community work and in the projects, for example, Amahoro Amani. And those who have a background in scouting or identify themselves as a scout, they also identify themselves with the culture and atmosphere in scouting where you volunteer on a free basis, while as those who don't really understand scouting's way of work, sometimes they stay only for a brief period, and then they come to a turn where they either require pay for being a scout leader or they quit. And it's hard to reach those who are not understanding scouting as a method to be involved for longer time. Was that correct? Yeah, yeah. So a question: how are you working with?
We try to put together the scout and the no scout. But after 1 or 2 years, the no scout went out, because when they came, they hear that it was the project, and the project meaning money. They, they thought that we have to give them money. After a long time, they said, there is not money. This is the things for you scout, but not, but not the no scout. And they went out. Now, if we have the young people who are engaged in the society, it is a luck for us because we have them. And they get something like a good education in the scouting.
Amos, do you have the same difficulties in retaining adults when they're not being paid for being scout leaders?
No, because our scout leaders are young rovers which are not paid. They are still below 18. And there is the one who are paid, who are heading the tribe, and we don't have any problem because they are paid.
Oh, okay. Really?
Yeah. I mean, we have,
That
refugee financially, we have what we need to pay from the government, from the scouts. We have everything we need to pay for leaders or head of tribes, young head of tribes. Like after the army, 22, 23, it's their job. And so they get paid, no problem.
Yes, yes. We talked about scouting, accessing other community resources.
This is their job usually before university. Or during university, being students. But yes, this is, and they are all coming, they were all in the scouts. You know, we have to go to the army. The army breaks the years of scouting. So you are a scout until 18, you go to the army for 3 years.
That looks fine.
Then a lot of them are coming back and now they want to work as leaders.
Yep.
Or head of tribes.
We've talked about the difference between the scouts and the non-scouts. Between the scouts and the non-scouts in their values. Is this your point, Gilbert?
Yeah.
In their values between scouts and non-scouts. Revalues. Regarding the values, was regarding payment for activities. Expectations. Yes, yes. We talked about cultural differences among countries.
Yeah, great.
And the community attitudes that go with each of those different cultures.
Yeah, so local differences within a country. Yeah.
Between and in.
Yeah.
Between and in, and within or and in local communities. Oh yes, yeah, you left out an I. Yep, that's great. What else? Okay. I cannot stop. It is the smell. We are.
That's a really strong smell.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It is. I have what? I would be happy to. Would you like to? No. No, okay. You were a great writer, Peter. Thank you for that.
Can I write some more?
Thank you for that. Thank you, Amos.
Somebody has the one that works. Hello. Okay, so can we have somebody to present back your feedback, please, or your work? Thank you, Peter.
We looked at refugees, and we came up with 4 main points. Firstly, we've said that in order to respond to the needs of refugees, amongst our 5 national scout organisations and countries, that we had scouting using its own resources. Rich teams, tribes, groups going out and working with other refugee groups or groups that were less fortunate. We talked about scouting accessing other community funds that may come from other non-government agencies or governments or even Save the Children. We talked about there were significant differences between those who were scouts and those who were non-scouts, and the differences in the communities regarding what was accepted as far as the values went, payments for activities, even some of the leaders or some of the local leaders wanting to be paid for what they were doing, and some of the expectations. So there is a difference between what we expect with scouting and our missions and our beliefs, and perhaps what some of the other groups are thinking. And we all talked about in our 5 different countries, there were enormous cultural differences, not only between our countries, but within our countries. Have I done justice? Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Very well. Thank you. Okay, Alianka, or no? Very good.
Well, thank you, Mary. Well, talk a little bit about poverty and how inspiring others to take action. Not an easy task, okay? What we discussed at first, what kind of skills and competence somebody shall have to work in this topic. And I think patience is one thing very important. Goal orientation, okay? People shall understand what to do, how to deal with situation. Recognize and understanding the reality. If you go to work with some kind of poor people, poverty is not the same thing for everybody. If you have poor people in an area where you have family structure and there is not a big difference in the society, is one reality. But in other situations where we have poor people living beside very rich people, and or where families have no structure, or where there are the crime in the same area. So this is a completely different situation. You must understand where you're going to work. Then motivation is also very important. No way of doing some good job with no motivation. And another important thing is learning best practices to avoid mistakes. So learn what are good experience or not. But this is not the question. The question is how to inspire others to do the job. And this is a little bit more complicated, how to take somebody from a comfortable zone and bring these people to work in another much more difficult situation. So how to inspire? One way is to show reality and propose ways to change this reality by scouts. We are scouts. We have a dream to do a better reality. So why not to face difficult challenge and move and try to change most difficult situations? The other important thing is training. So if you wanna work with difficult situation, you must be trained before, you must have some experience. Rewards, this is important. People doing a good job must be recognized for doing that and get some kind of reward that being a certificate or to use in the CV to get some kind of advantage, and also some simple things like a badge, like recognition. So those are the topics we think could inspire people to go ahead. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And our last group?
All right, we are doing the groups on school dropouts and including answering the question of educating our members. Now, there's a definition between these two. Now, first of all, we want to know how to help out the dropouts and also our own members. How do we affect our members? Now, for our members, we thought of educating them more than anything else, because we need to educate that when people drop out, there are various reasons, okay, and everybody's reason might be different. So the word that we want to talk about is inclusiveness. So whether the person is a dropout or school going, I think we should include them into our scouting community. Okay, that's for our existing members. And for those already dropped out, what can we do to help them? Now, we thought that we can organize courses for certain child who has dropped out from school. These courses can be organized by the scouts, but run by the senior scouts. For example, things like computer classes, which the dropout might find useful in the future. Okay. A second thing, we can provide certain simple form of employment for the dropouts. Not necessarily you must pay them lots of money for those dropouts. Sometimes a simple meal will do. Because when these kids drop out from school, especially if it's due to poverty, giving them a simple meal actually will go a long way. Some councils and troops, they might have shelters. Maybe, again, we get them away from the streets and provide a little shelter temporary shelters for them. Okay. Other things we can do is tie up with other organizations. We know that sometimes these dropouts, they must have a place to go. They might not necessarily come to scouts. So they might go to their churches or even the social family homes and so on. So instead of us looking for the kids, these kids are already there. Then we reach out to them through this organization and hopefully we can help them. All right. And of course, we thought of some people drop out not because they don't want to go to school, but there are no schools to go to. Because in certain countries, due to war and so on, they don't have a school. So one way, a very practical way is, of course, we can do some fundraising projects and build schools. Okay? And of course, building schools can be a physical thing, or we thought that the other option is actually a non-physical school. Because the student might have dropped out from school, again, due to reason, but when they come for our meeting, after the meeting, we might teach them simple literacy skill. Simple reading, simple numeracy, which our adults leaders might be able to teach. Not necessarily must teach them very high-level mathematical solution, but simple thing that can let them deal with their daily life. I thought that would be pretty useful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. After listening to the presentations and getting the spirit in the presentations, I'll not really go through this. I just want to jump to one last component so that we capture the mood in going to the next steps. So in terms of some of the necessary resources, I think some of this has come out, that whatever issue we see, we need to turn that into a project idea and then work the project way. So that, and there are just several characteristics of a project. You aim to produce something unique, a unique product. And ask yourself, what difference do you want to make? And that's one of the key considerations to have. The other element for you will be, for example, consider this as a problem that requires a solution. And I think this has come from the different group works in terms of what could be the solutions. So again, I'll not venture so much into this. So remember, you have an objective, and your project needs to have some specifications. You cannot do everything. You must really focus on what you really want to achieve. The project must have a budget, needs to have a budget. And you need to consider that a project consumes resources. For example, it will not be advisable to say that as a local scout group, we want to build a school for 100 children when all you have is, let's say, in dollars is $100. Then you say, we are changing lives by building a school. So you need to consider that it consumes resources, both human and non-human. So that also is a call for partnerships. Next. The 4 key things that will come into your mind when you talk about a project are the PCTS, the issue of performance, the issue of cost, the issue of time, and the issue of scope. So they sound as 4 simple things, but these are 4 key things that ideally what you're doing is, are you making a difference within a particular time, within a particular cost, and within a given scope? So in a general sense. So next. So what are some of these factors to consider? And this all came up here. One of these factors will be like understand the social and cultural context. So you need to work from whatever people you want to reach. These marginalized young people you are reaching, you need to consider them not as beneficiaries of whatever you're initiating, but as participants. Understand their context. And I know from your experiences you can share many stories. You have the hardest thing to achieve in any project is entry to the community. How do you enter the community? How do you enter into the young people you want to impact on? So for you to be able to enter into them, the starting point is you need to understand them and understand them from their context. Other key elements, for example, communication. He said that 90% of projects fail or failure is attributed to lack of proper communication. So you may have good project ideas, but if you don't have good communication mechanisms, then you'll imagine if we were to come here and each person talks their native language, which no one understands. The session may not even, we'll come out here talking different things. So communication is very key. Not just the appropriate channels, but also whatever you communicate. One of the things very interesting is the issue of words and images. When you're dealing with marginalized people, one of the things that comes up is sensitivity. For example, when you talk to, for example, young people who are HIV positive, terms like, for example, calling them victims is a discriminatory term. Or sometimes you hear many people use, and sometimes you use this unconsciously or subconsciously, saying like AIDS orphans. It's something that is easy to say, but in its own context, it's very discriminatory. So as leaders, when we engage into projects, words and images are very key for us. Recognition. You'll work with a team of people. You need to learn to appreciate people for their contribution, especially within the scouting framework. You work with volunteers because one of the key successes will be based on community mobilization. Once you mobilize the communities, whether someone just brings in a pen and says that I hear you are starting a school, all I can afford is just 1 pen. Learn to appreciate and to recognize that, because all people need is that appreciation, not really in monetary terms, but just recognition, because everyone counts in a project. Then the last point here is critical for us. We talk about safe from harm. Ensure that the structures you set and maintain are really those structures that ensure safety. So I think these are just key considerations, but what is critical is for us, Mary, how do we proceed? We need to act now. So from our discussions, I think it will be good to sum up this session if each of us, whatever your area of interest is, if you just write one, this is now community action challenge, that I understand the needs of the marginalized, and I understand the role of our NSO, and I think I can contribute in this area. Just one action. It could be in form of that area of interest in terms of practically what you think you can do as an individual, or you can initiate to support working with the marginalized in your NSO. So just one, it will be good to have them on the marker pen, which are being distributed. Then once you are through, we'll once you're through the actions, you don't have to write your name. You remember it. You just come and post it here. So just write the action or the project and come paste it on the wall. Just feel free, come and post it. You can tell us in 1 second what it is.
I'm going to get a small group of people together when I go back to think about what we can do for the refugees in our state and then work out a plan. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah. Next, let's keep the momentum. Let's keep the momentum. We are posting our actions now. We are turning this inspiration, turning this passion into action. So what are you going to do? What are we posted as your action?
Oh, my action is teaching children basic numeracy and literacy skill.
Wow. Next. The first 4 will share with us. The others will just post. Okay.
There we have it. I will discuss with the government the possibility to use scouting as a method to teach Swedish to new migrants.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so what I want to do is I want to initiate a network of local scout groups because I want to local scout groups that has positive experience with marginalized youth to share the successes and learn from others, because I don't know what is happening in my country.
Wow, that's nice. So now we just post them. Thank you. Anyone remaining? If you feel there's no action, just write it, no action, then come post it also. There's no action. No, just write no action. Anyone remaining? Okay. This is the final one.
Well, one action we are doing are contact schools and to incentivize and convince them to open and support groups of scouts together with the school. We already opened 16 new groups the last 2 years in our region, contacting schools directors and divulgating scouting for them. So we are working on this goal.
Thank you. When I look at the wall, I'll summarize with a very short story. There was once this young girl, or boy, let me say girl, this young girl who walked along the ocean with the father. And as they were walking, the young girl could pick crabs that were swept out of the ocean by the waves and throw them back into the ocean. And the father told the girl that, my daughter, you don't have to bother picking the crabs and throwing them back, because along the shore, which is very huge, you cannot cover, several of them are swept out of the ocean. The young girl looked at the father and said, I didn't know the ocean is that huge, but Daddy, I'm glad I made a difference in the life of this one crab I threw back in the ocean. So for you also, when we look at this wall, we see signs of commitment that you have made based on your passion of making a difference. It's not about doing huge things. It's simply about doing, even if they're small things, but in great ways that make that impact. So that if we meet again in whatever forums, we'll say that from our wall, this is now our wall of wonder. From our wall of wonder, of all these amazing projects, either to be initiated or already ongoing, we look back and say, wow.
Okay, we have just two more things to share with you. What we saw today in the short cut video from the Philippines about the Ticket for Life project, I think shows us that nothing is impossible. Because if you looked at the situation of street children surviving day to day on the street and said, how can we put scouting into that? Your initial reaction would have to be, we can't put scouting into that because scouting doesn't fit in that. And yet, they have proved time and again that actually scouting does fit very well and support in that. So it's just about looking at the situation and finding the road in, finding the avenue, finding the way to make a difference in any given situation. And there are projects that happen all over the world, all of the time. And very recently, there was a, UNESCO had the World Youth Forum in October. And to the World Youth Forum, there were 45 youth-led projects selected from 1,500 youth-led projects that were submitted. And at the Youth Forum in October, these 45 were 9 projects from each of the 5 regions in the world. And at the Youth Forum, the youth delegates chose 3 projects from each of the 5 regions of the world to be submitted to the UNESCO conference, which happened only last week, I think. And so they're not all in the area of marginalized youth, but marginalized youth is one of the areas. And so we have the 45 of them here for you to take in order that they will. And there's a short video that talks about the 15 that we're going to show you in a moment. And while you're doing that, the last thing we have for you to do is to fill out our evaluation card, which you will become familiar with over the session because you will get one of these 3 times a day for the next 3 days. So if you could pass them on. Yeah. And before, if you just pass them so that everybody has one. But before you do anything with those, if you don't mind for just a second, if you would go back and find the friend that you found when you came into the room, whose expectations you shared. And if you would just chat for a moment among yourselves about those expectations that you set yourself and you shared at the beginning. And up here beside our wall of wonder, we have a wall of expectations. And you might like to post whether or not your expectations were met, were not met, or you're not sure whether they were met or not. So if you could give us your post-it when you have discussed them. I actually forgot about that. So they do that. We'll give them a minute. Yes. Yeah. We'll put it on the page of the website. We'll put it down the back of the room. We'll put it down the back of the room. No, if you're not, no, it can be not sure. I mean, we came not knowing, yeah. What? In your English. Your third language, Peter. That goes in the end. Okay, so your evaluation card goes in the mailbox at the end of the room, which you can do on your way out if you wish. And if you have shared your expectations and you're happy with that, we'll show you the video. Money for filling out forms. If you expect to receive money for any of this, you're in the wrong game. So again, this is just a sample of the type of projects that went, but they're all youth-led projects, which is the interesting thing. They didn't come from organizations or people sitting around in committees or teams. They all came from youth.